Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Thank you, colleagues. I've been to this conference before. It was about 10, 11 years back. And I clearly remember I was scheduled for the last session of the last day. So happy to got promoted in the meantime. So as you can see, the focus of my research at the moment is I'm very interested in looking at what's referred to in the literature as digital humor, and more particularly memes, to try and find ways of seeing which way we can use digital humor to specifically, in my case, to enhance what is referred to as social linguistic competence. So now, to understand all of these, it is very important, I think, that I need to contextualize my research, and you need to understand a country like South Africa, where I'm from. If you Google it or use ChatGPT and to get some information on South Africa, you will find that South Africa is regarded as one of the most linguistic diverse countries. I think we're right next to India and Bolivia in South America, but we have in the region of 20 to 30 indigenous languages, of which 12, it used to be 11, but we've recently added sign language as an official language. So we're a country with at least 12 official languages, which give you an idea of the kind of linguistic diversity that I'm talking about here. And not only in terms of the different languages, but also in my case, I am teaching at the university in Cape Town, and I'm teaching one of the official languages, which is called Afrikaans. And Afrikaans is the third largest language in South Africa. And Afrikaans is spoken by different people in different parts of the country. And with that comes a dialectal variation as well. So we're really talking about South Africa as a country in terms of the linguistic diversity, but also a dialectal variation. And that is why research of this nature is so important to me, because I find myself in a position where I teach a group of students, undergraduate students, Afrikaans students who are either home language speakers or second or third language speakers, and who speak different varieties of the same language in one class, which actually makes it the ideal situation to teach them about social linguistics and language variety and different registers and so forth and so on. So, like I just said, one needs to understand the multilingual and the multilingual nature of a country like South Africa. And this linguistic diversity that I'm talking about, it's not just evident in universities, it's also evident in schools. Also, the fact that we are dealing with different regional dialects. So, what exactly is the focus of my research? What I am interested in is to get a new understanding of memes and how to use it. So conventionally, when we think of memes, we think of these little bits of information that students create and that they send around as some sort of trivial entertainment, so to speak. But during my research, when I really started looking closely at these memes, I realized that what you see in front of you is not just entertainment. This is an example of authentic language in use that you see in front of you. This is a social linguistic artifact, so to speak, because it speaks of a specific dialect that's being used. There is code switching, there's switching between registers, and all of those. And I thought that, yes, people for quite some time now have been using memes in different ways in their teaching, but the question for me is, to what extent can we then use memes to enhance something which is called sociolinguistic competence, which is a little bit more than just the linguistic competence in the language, which refers to the ability to understand that language is used in different contexts, in different ways, in different registers by different people, and so forth and so on. So that really was the focus of my research. So like I say, it means to me reflect what is known as hybridity. There's examples of code switching, variation, and intertextuality. So I'm teaching a group of undergraduate students. So instead of me just giving them a textbook definition of what code switching or intertextuality or register switching is, using memes, one can then actually, in a very practical way, show and illustrate how something like code switching, for example, is used effectively to bring across a message, and in this case, to bring across humor. And I must say that while preparing this presentation, I had to remind myself about the fact that humor is very language specific, it's country specific, it's culturally specific as well. And a meme that we in South Africa might find funny might not be funny in different parts of Europe, for example. So that, of course, also speaks to the shortcomings in terms of using this method. But nevertheless, that's something that one needs to be aware of, the fact that humor in itself, and digital humor in this case, is very culturally and language specific. So that then brought me to the important question, like I said, of how memes, of how digital humor can be used specifically to develop social linguistic competence. So, just to give you an overview of what I will be talking about, I will briefly talk about some key concepts that I've identified for my research. I will just briefly also just show you how I've made the connection between digital humor on the one hand and language teaching on the other. I will talk a little bit about the theoretical framework that I will be using in the research. I've also done a lot of literature reviews so far, so I'll speak to the findings of that, and then I'll end off with my research agenda in terms of future research. So, three important concepts that I needed to really understand when I embarked on the study is, first of all, sociolinguistic competence, and to understand exactly what it means, and like I said, what it means for in the context of a country like South Africa. It really means to understand and to have a sociolinguistic awareness of the different languages around you and the different variations of the same language around you, without thinking that the standard form of the language might be superior to the non-standard varieties, which is a very important thing, especially when you teach on this level. So yes, so and also to come to the understanding of what is meant with different registers and the social meanings behind all of that. The second important concept is what is known as digital humor, which obviously differs from conventional humor. Digital humor in this regard refers to the type of humor that we find in online spaces in the form of memes, emojis, TikTok videos, and all of these things. It's also important to understand that digital humor is mostly in a multimodal form. So it's not conventionally only text. So there's this interaction between text and pictures and videos and so forth. And in all of that, the humor is created. And it's actually very interesting for anyone to try and analyze exactly how the humor is created. So one needs to understand that as well. And then the third an important concept is the concept of social linguistic humor, um, which is really the focus for me in the thing that really interests me is the fact that language is look at the ways that language itself can be used to create the humor in itself. So the humor is in the language itself. Um, so, and I'll show you some examples later on where you can see where the language itself and how in the creation of the humor, the language has inside, for example, a meme like this can, for example, be used to explain to students something like similes and metaphors, for example, because that is how the humor is created. The humor is created by using an implicit comparison between two different things, for example. Same the example of the hyperbole that you see underneath. Um, Also, if you think about trying to explain to the students the concept of incongruity or irony, this can also be done with digital humor. It can also be done with a meme, for example. The same with satire and sarcasm, for example. The same applies also to memes that one finds where the humor is in the wordplay itself, or like I said earlier, where you maybe want to explain a concept like intertextuality. The intertextuality is found in this meme, for example, because you have to know the meme, the movie where the scene is coming from to understand the joke or to catch the joke. So that, in a very practical way, shows you what intertextuality really is and how it's needed to interpret humor in this space. And then in terms of the social linguistic part of it, this is really the part that interests me. Because if you look at the top one, for example, is that you can already see what an innovative and interesting way it is to introduce the concepts of the dialects and language variation and people pronouncing or having different accents of English and all of those. So the same also when you look at the bottom ones where you have examples of register switching, the formal register and the informal register, and a nice example of code switching between English and Spanish, for example. So these are ways that memes are already being used. But the question, obviously, now, the more important question is to put everything, all of this, within the appropriate theoretical framework. And what I've found so far in my research is that to really understand the value of digital humor for language teaching, one needs to use at least 4 different theoretical frameworks. First of all, one has to look at Sperber and Wilson's relevance theory, which tells us about cognitive benefits and the fact that that the brain will go to great lengths just to try and understand the humor in the meme, for example, with the minimum effort as they put it. So relevance theory is important, and also the multimodal discourse analysis is also very important theory to understand, to help you understand this, because you have this interaction between the different modes. Then one has also have to go and look at humor studies and the different ways in which humor is created, as well as digital social linguistics, which refers to the social linguistics as it happens within the digital context. So what is it that the literature is showing us at the moment? The literature review tells us that there's different ways, different activities that teachers use. For example, where learners or students are asked to analyze a meme and to discuss it in classroom, for example, or where learners are asked to create their own memes, or memes can be used when you do vocabulary revision. You can also use it to explain concepts like humor and irony, for example. And sometimes it's also used as a stimulus for writing projects where you give learners a particular meme, and the purpose of that is to stimulate learners to write about this particular topic. And then more importantly is also to find out what the pedagogical benefits of all of these are. And what turned up in the literature review is as follows. First of all, there's enough findings that show that when using memes in language teaching, it reduces anxiety and an increase in engagement. It also fosters communicative competence. It helps to develop a pragmatic competence, which is very important, especially for my students, like I said, on undergraduate level. It creates a positive attitude with learners. And like I said, the gap that I'm trying to fill in my research is the one at the bottom, which is really looking at ways in which the use of memes can develop also a social linguistic competence. Which then brings me lastly to my research agenda. First of all, I think when integrating memes into your language teaching, it asks for a rethinking of your pedagogy. It's not so that you no longer just look at memes as, like I said, as trivial entertainment, but really looking at memes as social linguistic, authentic texts that one can use. It also asks for an understanding of digital literacy. So when we use memes in our teaching, it also helps learners and students to develop a particular digital literacy which is necessary for the century that we live in. And then lastly, it is in the end all about developing competence. But like I said, not just a linguistic competence, but also a pragmatic and also social linguistic competence. And that's my story.